David, we're here with House Freedom Caucus Chairman Mark Meadows here. What is with this skinny version of the bill? If it gets to the House, is it going to lose support from the Freedom Caucus?
Well, the skinny version in itself, if it comes before a vote in the House, would not pass. So it becomes a vehicle. I think the biggest thing is we look at what's happening in the Senate. If they do a skinny version, it gets rid of the individual mandates, gets rid of the employer mandate. And what I'm hearing now is the device taxes. So all your viewers, as they look at that, they should see it as a good sign for medical devices and the like. It would repeal that. That's not going to be what gets signed into law, or just that. So it'll be used as a vehicle where we'll come together on conference. So you'll get some people in the Senate, some members in the House, and they'll come together and hopefully continue the negotiations.
But if we talk about conference, that puts this in 2018 calendar year, no?
Well, it could, but it doesn't necessarily do that, and your point is well taken. It shouldn't. We've got to do it now. In fact, if we're going to do a conference, I think the conferees need to come together over August, work out their differences, and then the first or second week we're back in September is make sure that we pass it and send it to the president. If this waits and goes past Thanksgiving or into January of next year, premiums won't come down. And you and I both agree. It's all about the premiums. It's all about making sure that those markets are complete, so we've got to do that.
Well, let me ask you, earlier this morning I interviewed Democratic National Committee Chairman Tom Perez. He said in his words that the Freedom Caucus will, quote, hijack the debate if this goes to conference. Your response?
Well, I mean, I don't even know that I'll be a conferee, and so, Mr. Perez, who I know well, I appreciate the compliment, but I think he gives me far more credit than I actually have in terms of the debate. Now, will we be a force? Certainly. The Freedom Caucus has the power of negation, and so, we know to get 218 votes in the House, we have to bring them along. But I've found most of our members very willing to make real concessions. This all started out that we wanted 12 mandates repealed. We settled on 4. Hopefully, in the end, we still get those 4, but maybe in a tangential way that we address it. But it's all about premiums, and I'm sure that Tom Perez would agree with me. We need to lower premiums.
And I want to make this absolutely clear. Yeah. The skinny version has no support amongst the Freedom Caucus.
Right, in terms of a standalone bill.
No support as a standalone.
We support the concepts in there, but it's not a repeal. It's not even close to repeal. So we see it as a vehicle to hopefully continue the negotiations, and I applaud the Senate for at least being willing to stay in there and try to negotiate and find some common ground.
I want to talk about tax reform.
Sure.
When are we going to get a proposal from the Freedom Caucus, and what are you hearing in terms of timing from the White House?
Well, I can tell you in tax reform, and I know that this is real critical to your viewers and listeners out there, within the last week or so, there's been real movement with the Senate, the House, and the White House getting together on really some foundational issues. For us, we thought we needed to have that before we go home in August so that we can at least start to talk about it and socialize those particular aspects. I believe that we see that before we go home in August in terms of some broad principles, hopefully working on the legislative text over August and then voting on it in September and October.
There's been some question that there could be some debate about whether or not to raise the debt limit. Will there be a debate? No. Are you talking with the Treasury Secretary?
I mean, we've talked to Secretary Mnuchin. He wants a clean debt ceiling. We've never had a clean debt ceiling in our history, and so there's always been something attached to it. But
so that's just friction.
Yeah, there's some friction, but the full faith and credit of our country is not to be messed with. We're going to find a way to do that. The Freedom Caucus believes that we need to do it sooner than later, and we don't need to wait on that. But at the same time, I think there are some vehicles that gets close to a clean debt ceiling increase, but we're not going to default on our debt.
Mr. Chairman, President Trump tweeting just moments ago banning all transgender Americans from serving in the U.S. military. Yeah. There has been some conservative debate about funding for medical procedures for transgender Americans.
Right.
There has never been a debate about whether or not, a recent debate amongst conservatives about whether or not transgender Americans should be able to serve.
Right.
Your thoughts?
When you're the commander-in-chief, you have to make tough calls, and we're right now about to vote within the next 48 hours here in the House on funding our military. It is $621 billion. You got another $10 billion for overseas contingency operations, and so when we're talking about bullets and other things, this highlighted the surgery that was there started to highlight in terms of policy and what we do and where we go.
Do you agree with the president's tweets?
I agree with the president taking this position. I do. When he gets informed by generals and others that this is not only a distraction, but it's one of those things that you have to deal with when our national security is priority one, I support him in that decision. Is it a tough decision? Yes. Could it be misconstrued? I think it can be, and I think it's incumbent upon us to really look at what our military does from a national security standpoint and make sure that it does not take on a personal attack against any particular people group. And I know that
the 15,000 Americans who are currently serving in the military, who are transgender American heroes serving in the military. We'll leave it there. We appreciate you coming on.